What if I told you the most powerful weapon in the Marvel Universe isn't a weapon at all, it's a mirror? Thor's hammer doesn't just give you power, it reflects who you are. Pick it up when you're arrogant? Nothing. Pick it up when you're greedy? Nothing. Pick it up when you're worthy? Everything. That's why I created Mjolnir in 1962. Not to give Thor power, to show him and everyone else what power really means. You know, when people think about Thor, they think about the hammer, the lightning, the cape, the godly power. That iconic inscription, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." It's become one of the most famous phrases in all of comics. It's been quoted in movies, referenced in pop culture, debated by fans for 60 years. But nobody asked the real question that haunted me when I was creating this character. Why did I make worthiness the requirement? Why not strength? The Hulk is strong. Why not courage? Captain America is courageous. Why not nobility or intelligence or determination or any other heroic quality we could have chosen? Why worthy? Let me tell you the truth. Creating Thor and his hammer wasn't just about making another superhero to compete with DC's Justice League. It wasn't just about adding a powerhouse to our roster. It was about asking a question that nobody in comics, or frankly, in the real world, wanted to ask in 1962. What if power didn't belong to the strongest? What if it didn't belong to the richest, or the most aggressive, or the best born? What if power belonged to the best, to those who deserved it, to those who would use it responsibly? That was radical. That was dangerous. That was everything I wanted to say. It's early 1962, and we're on fire at Marvel. The Fantastic Four launched in November 1961, and by early 62, it's clear we've got something special. Readers are responding to these flawed heroes who fight with each other, who have money problems, who feel real. Spider-Man just launched in Amazing Fantasy number 15, and the response is incredible. Kids are connecting with Peter Parker in ways they never connected with Superman or Batman. The Hulk is out there smashing things and struggling with his own monstrous nature. We're building something new, something different from what DC was doing with their perfect godlike heroes. We're making heroes human. We're making them relatable. We're making them matter. But Martin Goodman, my publisher, he's not satisfied. He never is. Martin comes to me one day, I remember it clearly. He's pacing around my office like he always did when he had something on his mind, and he says, "Stan, we need something bigger, something more powerful than what we've got." I said, "Martin, we've got the Hulk. He's the strongest one there is." That's literally his catchphrase. "Not strong enough," Martin says. DC has Superman. Superman can move planets. He's faster than light. He's invincible. And he's still outselling everything we publish. We need our own powerhouse. We need someone who can stand toe-to-toe with Superman. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, more powerful than the Thing, more powerful than the Hulk. How do we do that without just creating another invincible bore? Another character who's so powerful that nothing can challenge him? Because here's the problem I'd been wrestling with since I started thinking seriously about superhero storytelling. The more powerful you make a hero, the less interesting they become. Let me talk about Superman for a moment, because Superman was both the template and the problem. Superman was created in 1938, and he was revolutionary. The first real superhero. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. He was everything Americans wanted to be in the late 30s, early 40s. Strong, confident, unbeatable, incorruptible. But by 1962, Superman had become a narrative problem. He was too powerful. He could do anything. He had super strength, super speed, flight, invulnerability, heat vision, X-ray vision, freeze breath, super hearing. The list kept growing. Every time writers needed him to solve a problem, they'd give him a new power. And that meant that the only way to create drama was to invent increasingly ridiculous weaknesses. Kryptonite, magic, red sun radiation. And even then the stories felt hollow because we all knew Superman would win. He always won. He had to win. He was Superman. Where's the drama in that? Where's the humanity? Where's the struggle? That's what I kept coming back to. If I was going to create a character more powerful than Superman, I had to make sure he was more interesting than Superman, more human than Superman, more flawed than Superman. I had to give him something Superman didn't have, the possibility of failure. Not physical failure. Superman could fail physically when he encountered kryptonite, but moral failure, character failure, the failure to be worthy of the power he possessed. So I started diving into mythology. I'd always loved mythology, Greek, Roman, Norse, Egyptian, these ancient stories about gods and heroes and the lessons they taught humanity. These weren't just adventure stories. They were moral tales. They were about hubris and redemption and the consequences of pride. And Norse mythology in particular fascinated me because those gods weren't perfect. They were flawed in very human ways. They made mistakes. They got drunk. They fought with each other. They could be wounded. They could die. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, was coming, and even the mightiest of them couldn't stop it. Thor, the god of thunder, son of Odin, the All-Father, strongest of the Aesir, defender of both Asgard and Midgard, wielder of Mjolnir, the hammer forged in the heart of a dying star, a weapon so powerful it could level mountains, summon storms, open portals between worlds. In the original myths, Thor was a warrior, a fighter, sometimes a little dim, if we're being honest. He was strong and brave, but not particularly clever. He solved problems by hitting them with his hammer. He was loyal, protective, fierce in battle, but he was also proud, arrogant, quick to anger. He demanded respect, expected worship, took offense easily. Perfect, right? Ultimate power, born into godhood, born into royalty, the son of a king, destined to be a king himself. Boring, at least boring for what I wanted to do. See, that was my problem. If I just adapted Thor straight from Norse mythology, he'd be another Superman, another invincible god who solves every problem with overwhelming force, another character who's so powerful that writers have to create artificial weaknesses just to generate drama. Where's the humanity in that? Where's the struggle? Where's the character development? I sat down with Jack Kirby. Jack was the artistic genius behind so much of what we created at Marvel. Jack had been in the comic book industry since the 1930s. He'd co-created Captain America with Joe Simon back in 1941. He understood mythology and heroism and visual storytelling in a way nobody else did. I said, Jack, I want to do Thor. Martin wants a powerhouse, and Thor fits the bill. He's a god. He's as strong as we need him to be. But I don't want to do him as just a powerful god. I don't want another Superman. I want to do something different, something with depth. Jack, brilliant as always, he leaned back in his chair. Jack was always sketching while we talked. His hands never stopped moving. And he said, what if he's not just a god? What if there's a human element? What if he has to learn something? Learn what? I asked. Humility, Jack said. The myths are full of gods learning humility. What if our Thor starts out arrogant and he has to learn to be humble? What if he has to earn his power? And that's when the concept clicked. That's when I saw the whole thing. We'd make Thor powerful, yes, more powerful than any hero we'd created, but we'd also make him flawed, deeply flawed, arrogant, entitled. the kind of person who was born with everything and never had to work for anything, the kind of person who believed he deserved power simply because of who he was, not because of what he'd done, and then we'd take it all away, and then we'd make him earn it back. This is where Donald Blake came in, and Blake was crucial to the whole concept. We created Donald Blake as Thor's mortal identity, but Blake wasn't just a disguise or a secret identity like Clark Kent was for Superman. Blake was who Thor needed to become. Donald Blake was a doctor, a physician. He dedicated his life to healing people, to helping those who couldn't help themselves. He was compassionate and humble and selfless, all the things the original Thor, the arrogant god, wasn't. And here's the key detail, the one that made it all work. Donald Blake was disabled. He walked with a cane. He had a limp. He was physically limited in ways that Thor never was. Now, this was 1962. Disabled heroes didn't exist in comics. Heroes were strong, capable, physically perfect. The idea of a hero with a disability, that was unthinkable. But that's exactly why it mattered. By living as Donald Blake, by experiencing physical limitation, by dealing with a disability, by being judged and underestimated because of that cane, Thor learned something he could never have learned as a god. He learned compassion. He learned humility. He learned that strength isn't just physical. He learned that the measure of a person isn't in their muscles or their speed or their divine heritage. The measure of a person is in their character. Let me walk you through the origin story we created, because every detail mattered. Donald Blake is on vacation in Norway. He's a doctor from America, taking a much-needed break from his practice. And while he's there, an alien scout ship lands. The Stone Men from Saturn, one of Jack's wonderfully bizarre alien races, they're preparing an invasion. Blake witnesses this. He tries to warn people, but nobody believes him. He's just a disabled American tourist. Who's going to listen to him? The aliens spot Blake. They chase him, and Blake runs, limping, struggling with his cane, terrified, until he finds a cave. He hides in this cave deep in the Norwegian mountains while the aliens search for him. And in that cave, trapped, helpless, disabled, afraid, Blake finds a wooden stick, just an old walking stick, gnarled and weathered. And in his frustration, in his fear and anger and helplessness, he strikes it against the ground, and it transforms into Mjolnir. The wooden stick becomes a hammer of Uru metal, inscribed with mystical runes, and Donald Blake transforms into Thor, god of thunder. The cane becomes his source of power. The symbol of his weakness becomes the key to his strength. But, and this is crucial, it's not automatic. It's not permanent. The transformation requires the cane. It requires that Blake be worthy. If he's not, if he's acting out of anger or pride or selfishness, the stick is just a stick. The power is denied. Every time Blake picks up that cane, every time he strikes it against the ground, he's being tested. The magic, the enchantment, it's judging him. It's asking, do you deserve this power? Are you using it for the right reasons? Are you worthy? Now let me talk about Mjolnir itself, because this is where the philosophy really comes in. I didn't want the hammer to just be a weapon. I didn't want it to be a tool. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to represent something fundamental about how power should work in the world. That's why I created the inscription. Jack and I, we went back and forth on the exact wording. We knew it had to be perfect. It had to be memorable. It had to encapsulate everything we were trying to say about Thor and power and worthiness. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. Whosoever, not just Thor, not just gods, not just the strong or the noble or the chosen, anyone, everyone. Any being in the universe who proves themselves worthy can wield this power. If he be worthy, not if he's strong enough, not if he's brave enough, Not if he's smart enough or fast enough or royal enough, if he be worthy. And what does worthy mean? That's the question the hammer asks. That's the test. Worthy means selfless. It means putting others before yourself. It means using power to protect, not to dominate. It means having the humility to know that power is a responsibility, not a right. It means understanding that strength without character is just violence, that power without wisdom is just destruction. The hammer doesn't care about your muscles. The Hulk can't lift Mjolnir, and the Hulk is stronger than Thor physically. The hammer doesn't care about your intelligence. Reed Richards can't lift it, and he's the smartest man on earth. The hammer doesn't care about your willpower. Green Lantern's ring runs on willpower, but willpower alone isn't worthiness. Mjolnir cares about character, about who you are when nobody's watching, about what you do with power when you have it, about whether you see power as a privilege or a responsibility. That's what makes the hammer different from every other weapon in comics. That's what makes it more than just a tool. It's a mirror, like I said in the beginning. It reflects the truth of who you are, and most people don't like what they see in that reflection. Let me dig deeper into this worthiness concept, because it's really the heart of everything. In 1962, we were living in a world shaped by World War II. The Cold War was at its peak. The Soviet Union and the United States were locked in this ideological struggle, and both sides believed they were right. Both sides believed they deserved to have power, to shape the world, to determine how humanity should live. And underlying all of that was this assumption that power belonged to the strong. That might made right, that if you had the military strength, the nuclear weapons, the economic dominance, then you got to call the shots. I hated that assumption. I'd grown up during the Depression, watched my parents struggle, watched people with money and power use that power to enrich themselves while ordinary people suffered. I'd seen strong men rise to power in Europe, Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, men who believed their strength gave them the right to rule. And I'd watched them fall, because strength isn't enough, power isn't enough. You can be the strongest person in the room and still be a tyrant. You can have all the power in the world and still be a monster. So when I created Thor's hammer, I wanted to say something about that. I wanted to create a weapon that rejected the idea that strength equals right, a weapon that demanded more, a weapon that asked, yes, but do you deserve this power? Think about how radical that is. Think about what it means. It means that no matter how strong you are, no matter how much you want the power, no matter how convinced you are that you should have it, if you're not worthy, you don't get it. The power is denied. The hammer won't move. And that creates this beautiful paradox. The most powerful weapon in the Marvel universe can only be wielded by people who don't want power for its own sake, who don't crave domination, who understand that power is meant to serve others, not yourself. Now let me come back to Donald Blake, because the Blake-Thor duality was really the mechanism through which we explored worthiness. When Thor transformed into Blake, or was it when Blake transformed into Thor? The question of which was the real identity became fascinating as we wrote more stories. He didn't just change physically, he changed psychologically, emotionally, morally. As Blake, Thor experienced things no god could experience: limitations, vulnerability, dependency on others. The way society treats people with disabilities, the condescension, the underestimation, the subtle and not so subtle discrimination. Blake couldn't run into danger. He couldn't fight without his cane. He couldn't save the day through physical strength. He had to think. He had to plan. He had to rely on his intelligence, his medical knowledge, his understanding of human nature. And through Blake, Thor learned that these things, intelligence, planning, understanding were just as valuable as divine strength, maybe more valuable, because strength can destroy, but wisdom can build. Strength can win battles, but compassion can prevent wars. I remember writing a story early on where Blake is in a situation where someone needs immediate medical help, and Thor could appear in seconds, just strike the cane, transform, fly them to a hospital with superhuman speed. But Blake realizes that transforming would waste precious seconds, and he has the medical knowledge to help right now, right here, with his mortal hands. So he stays as Blake. He saves the person as a doctor, not as a god. And in that moment, he's more heroic as the disabled doctor than he ever could be as the mighty Thor. That was the point. That was what worthiness meant. It meant understanding when to use power and when not to. It meant knowing that sometimes the greatest strength is restraint. Sometimes the greatest courage is vulnerability. Over the decades, we've done stories where other characters try to lift Thor's hammer, and these stories always became character studies. They became moments where we could reveal fundamental truths about who these people were. Captain America lifted it, of course. Steve Rogers is the embodiment of worthiness, not because he's strong, though he is, not because he's brave, though he is, but because he's selfless to his core, because he would sacrifice himself without hesitation for anyone, friend or enemy, because he always tries to do the right thing, even when the right thing costs him everything he has. In one story, we had Thor injured, unable to fight, and Cap picks up Mjolnir, not because he wants the power, but because someone has to protect people, and Thor can't, and the hammer comes to him, because he's not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about whether he's worthy. He's thinking about who needs help. That's worthiness. That's what the hammer recognizes. But other characters, they can't lift it. And watching them try, watching them fail, that reveals who they are. Tony Stark can't lift it. And Tony, genius that he is, he understands why. He even jokes about it sometimes. Yeah, the hammer has a biometric lock, keyed to Thor's specific worthiness frequency. Obviously, I could build something similar, but behind the joke, you can see it bothers him, because Tony knows he's too selfish, too arrogant, too focused on his own ego. The hammer sees right through his armor, through his genius, through his billions, and says, "No, not you." Bruce Banner can't lift it. The Hulk definitely can't lift it. The Hulk tried once, and the hammer didn't budge, which made the Hulk angrier, which made him try harder, which made it even more clear that rage doesn't equal worthiness. Even characters who are good, who are heroic, they often can't lift it. Because worthiness isn't about being good. It's about being selfless. It's about having genuine humility. It's about understanding that power is a burden, not a privilege. And here's what made Thor's story so compelling. Even Thor loses his worthiness sometimes. We've done stories where the hammer rejects Thor, where he reaches for Mjolnir and it won't come to him, where he tries to lift it and it might as well be welded to the floor. And those moments of failure, of rejection, those were always the most interesting Thor stories. Because when the hammer rejects you, it's not saying you're weak. It's saying you're not who you should be. You've lost your way. You've let pride or anger or selfishness corrupt you. You've forgotten what power is for. I remember writing a story where Thor, in his arrogance, makes a decision that gets people hurt. He was trying to do the right thing, but he was doing it for the wrong reasons. He wanted to be the hero. He wanted the glory. He wanted to prove he was mighty. And after the battle, when the dust settled and the casualties were counted, Thor reached for his hammer, and it wouldn't move. Odin didn't curse him. The enchantment didn't change. Thor simply wasn't worthy anymore. And watching Thor grapple with that, watching him confront his own unworthiness, watching him struggle to understand what he'd done wrong, watching him work to become worthy again, that was real character development. That was growth. Because worthiness isn't permanent. It's not something you achieve once and you're done. It's something you have to maintain, something you have to prove every day, something you can lose if you're not careful. The hammer keeps testing you. The hammer keeps asking, are you still who you were when I first accepted you? Are you still putting others first? Are you still humble? Are you still worthy? And if the answer is no, even for a moment, the power is revoked. The hammer is just metal. The god is just a man. You know, creating Thor in 1962 had this interesting historical resonance that I don't think we fully appreciated at the time. We were coming out of the 1950s, this era of conformity and father knows best and unquestioning respect for authority. But by the early 60s, that was starting to crack. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum. Young people were starting to question why things were the way they were. The counterculture was beginning to form, and here we were, creating a character whose whole premise was, just because you have power doesn't mean you deserve it. Just because you were born into privilege doesn't mean you're entitled to rule. You have to prove yourself. You have to earn it. That resonated with people in ways I didn't fully understand at first. Letters would come in from readers talking about how Thor's story made them think about authority differently, about power differently, about who really deserved to lead. Some readers wrote about their parents or teachers or bosses, people who had power over them but didn't deserve it, people who were arrogant or cruel or selfish, but society gave them authority anyway. And they'd say, I wish they had to face Thor's hammer. I wish they had to prove they were worthy. And I thought, yeah, me too. Because that's the fantasy, isn't it? That's what Thor's hammer represents. The fantasy that power would actually be distributed based on merit, based on character, based on worthiness, not birth or wealth or physical strength. In the real world, power goes to whoever can take it. Whoever is strong enough, rich enough, ruthless enough to seize it. And once they have it, they keep it, whether they deserve it or not. But in Thor's world, in the world I created, there's this one weapon that says, no, that's not how it works. Prove you deserve this. Prove you're worthy, or you get nothing. And that's why the hammer mattered so much. That's why it became iconic. Not because it gave Thor cool powers, because it represented justice, real justice, the kind of justice we wish existed in the real world. Fast forward to 2015. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going for 7 years at this point. They've done 2 Thor movies, both Avengers movies. And in Avengers Age of Ultron, there's this party scene. The team is relaxing after a mission, and they're hanging out, and someone, I think it's Tony, challenges everyone to try and lift Thor's hammer. It's sitting on a table. Thor is confident nobody can move it. And one by one, they try. Tony tries with his Iron Man glove. Rhodey tries helping him. They can't budge it. Banner tries. Can't move it. They're all making jokes, having fun with it. Then Steve Rogers steps up, Captain America, and he grabs the handle, and he pulls, and the hammer moves. Just a little, just a fraction of an inch, but it moves. And Thor's face, Chris Hemsworth's expression in that moment is perfect. He goes from confident to concerned in a split second because he realizes Steve could lift it if he wanted to. Steve is worthy. Audiences went crazy for that moment, absolutely crazy, because they understood what it meant, They'd been watching these movies for years, they knew these characters, and they knew that of course Steve Rogers is worthy. Of course he could wield Mjolnir. He's Captain America. He's the guy who dove on a grenade to save his squad before he even had powers. He's selflessness incarnate. And then 4 years later, in Avengers Endgame, it pays off. They're in the final battle. Thanos is about to kill Thor, and Mjolnir flies through the air, but not to Thor, to Steve. Captain America catches Mjolnir, and he stands there, shield in one hand, hammer in the other, lightning crackling around him. And Thor says, and this line is perfect, "I knew it." That moment, that was everything I'd been trying to say about worthiness since 1962. That was the validation of the entire concept. Steve Rogers wielding Thor's hammer wasn't about power. Everyone in that theater knew Steve was outmatched by Thanos. Having the hammer didn't suddenly make him as strong as Thor. That's not what it was about. It was about earning it. It was about proving through every choice he'd made across 11 years of movies that he deserved it, that he was worthy. And when the hammer came to him, it wasn't just giving him a weapon, it was acknowledging him. It was saying, you are what power should look like. You are who should hold this, not because you're strong, because you're good. I watched that moment in the theater. I was 96 years old at that point, and I'd seen my characters adapted 100 different ways. But watching Steve Rogers wield Mjolnir, watching the audience erupt, watching this thing I'd created 60 years earlier still mean something, still matter. That was special. That was proof that the hammer's question, "Are you worthy?" still resonates, still matters, still means something to people. You know, creating Thor taught me something about myself that I carried for the rest of my life. By 1962, I'd been in the comic book industry for over 20 years. I'd started as an assistant, worked my way up to editor, then head writer. I had power within Marvel. I had influence. I could make decisions that affected people's careers. And creating Thor, creating this character who had to constantly prove he deserved his power, it made me think about my own worthiness. Was I using my position well? Was I helping people? Was I creating opportunities for young artists and writers? Was I making the industry better? Or was I just using my power for my own benefit? Thor's hammer became my reminder. Every time I wrote a story about Thor proving his worthiness, I was reminding myself, power is a responsibility. Leadership is a responsibility. Influence is a responsibility. You don't get to have these things just because you worked your way up. Just because you've been around for a while, just because you're good at your job, you have to deserve them every single day. And if you're not using your power to help others, to create opportunities, to make things better, then you're not worthy of it. That's a hard standard to live up to. I didn't always succeed. I made mistakes. I made choices I regret. There were times when I was more focused on my own success than on helping others. Times when my ego got in the way, times when I wasn't worthy. But having Thor there, having that constant reminder of what worthiness should look like, it helped me try. It helped me course correct when I went astray. It helped me ask myself that uncomfortable question, am I worthy of this position? Am I using it the way I should? That's what Thor gave me. Not just a successful character, not just a revenue stream for Marvel, but a moral compass, a standard to aspire to. But here's the thing about worthiness, and this is what I really want people to understand. Worthiness isn't just about power, it's about everything. Are you worthy of the love people give you? Are you treating your spouse, your children, your friends the way they deserve to be treated? Are you being the person they think you are? Are you worthy of the trust people place in you? When someone confides in you, when someone relies on you, When someone believes in you, are you living up to that? Are you worthy of the opportunities you've been given? The education, the job, the privileges you have, are you using them well? Are you making the most of them? Are you paying it forward? These are hard questions. These are uncomfortable questions, because the honest answer is often, not always, not as much as I should be. I'm trying, but I fall short. And that's okay. That's human. That's the point. Thor isn't always worthy. He fails. He falls. He makes mistakes. He lets his pride get in the way. He acts out of anger instead of wisdom. He forgets what's important, but he keeps trying. He keeps working to be better. He keeps picking up that hammer and hoping that this time he'll have proven himself. This time he'll be worthy. That's the real heroism, not the godly power, not the lightning bolts, not the ability to fly or fight or destroy. The real heroism is the constant effort to be worthy, to be better today than you were yesterday, to ask yourself that hard question, am I worthy? And to actually care about the answer, to let it guide you. So that's why I gave Thor a hammer, and that's why I made him have to prove his worthiness, because I wanted to create a hero who showed us that power isn't an entitlement. It's not something you get to have just because you're strong or royal or chosen by birth. It's not something you deserve because you want it or because you think you'd use it well. Power is something you earn through your character, through your choices, through your willingness to be humble, to be compassionate, to put others before yourself, through your ability to see power not as a privilege, but as a burden, not as a right, but as a responsibility. The hammer is the test. The hammer is the mirror. The hammer is the question we should all be asking ourselves every single day. Am I worthy? Not of godly power, not of magic hammers, not of lightning and thunder and the ability to fly, but of the life I have, of the privileges I enjoy, of the trust people place in me, of the opportunities I've been given, of the power I hold, whatever form that power takes. Am I using these things well? Am I using them to help others? Am I being the person I should be? Am I worthy? Those are the questions Mjolnir asks. Those are the questions that matter. And after 60 years of writing stories about Thor and his hammer, after watching the character evolve through comics and movies and cartoons and video games, after seeing generations of readers connect with this idea of worthiness, I can tell you this. The answer to am I worthy is never permanent. It's not something you achieve once and you're done. It's not a box you check and then move on. It's something you have to prove every single day. Through every choice you make, through every action you take, through how you treat people when you have power over them, through what you do when nobody's watching. Thor teaches us that. The hammer teaches us that. And maybe that's the real magic of Mjolnir. Not that it grants power to the worthy, but that it forces us to think about what worthy means. That it makes us examine ourselves, that it holds up a mirror and asks, what do you see? Are you who you should be? Are you using what you have the way you should? And if the answer is no, if we're honest with ourselves and we realize we're falling short, then we have a choice. We can ignore it, pretend the mirror is lying, convince ourselves we're fine the way we are, or we can do what Thor does. We can admit we're not worthy yet. We can work to be better. We can strive to become the kind of person who deserves the power we have. That's the journey, that's the story. That's what Thor's hammer has been teaching us since 1962. So the next time you face a choice about how to use your power, whatever form that power takes in your life, ask yourself Thor's question, am I worthy? And then act accordingly. Excelsior,